Ready? Yeah, so what, yeah, Kasa, going to enlightenment, right? That's what we are doing here. Try to go that direction. Yeah. So yeah, welcome. The third evening on refuge. Yeah. And yeah, so to not explore, discover refuge a little bit more. Yeah. So that we try to do that, and then before we engage in that, first generate correct motivation. Yes, we always find that very important to do that. And so think that we're here again today to understand more about the Buddhist path, in particular the path to liberation and enlightenment, and why, in order to eliminate all suffering, and not only for yourself but for all beings. Yeah, every being is exactly the same as us, wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. So how wonderful would it be if you can actually make that all happen? Yeah, so try to generate that kind of motivation for yourself. Yeah. And then in front, imagine Sakyamuni Buddha, if you like, and surrounded by the masters of India, Tibet, and the other Buddhist traditions. And then surrounding yourself are those infinite sentient beings undergoing individual suffering. And think it's your responsibility to help them. And then you start helping them with leading them into the prayers. Yeah. To the
founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the complete, perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the complete and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakti clan, prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakti clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The indescribable, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing, the nature of space, object of the uniquely knowing transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious ones of the 3 times I prostrate. Tayata, gata gata paragata parasamgate bodhi soha. Tayata, gata gata paragata parasamgate bodhi soha. Tayata, gata gata paragata parasamgate bodhi soha. Sangye, chidam sunye chonam sa. Janjo bado dani yazo chi. Dagi chicho gire sonam ki. Chola penche sangye pasho. Zangye Shura Suki Chonam La Janje Badi Dani Kapsu Chi Dagi Jinsu Gile Nomam Ki Dola Tenche Sangi Droba Sho Sangye Chodan Suki Chonam La Janje Badi Dani Kapsu Chi Dagi Jinsu Gile Sonam Ki Dola Tenche Sangi Droba Sho 就正途讲给都是你是会到相信帮我去到我相信不到的了，恰恰 low. Yeah. So refuge, as we talked about, being a very important aspect of refuge is the resident refuge, right? And yeah, and that refuge is completely based on reasoning, as we saw, and also the great masters of India, the great philosophers, so to say, they came to the same kind of conclusions, right? That Arya Nagarjuna, when he was praising the Buddha, he was praising the Buddha for one particular teaching that actually eliminates the causes of suffering. Yeah, so the Buddha, Arya Nagarjuna praises the Buddha by you, Kasa, moved out of compassion,
you eliminate wrong views, you teacher of the sublime Dharma, to Gautam Buddha I pay homage. It's a very interesting verse, you know, that you moved out of compassion, right? So that's the as we talked about in the first evening, that the Buddha, you know, is moved or motivated by this incredible compassion, meaning doesn't make a distinction between friend, enemies, or those who harm or benefit them. Remember, we went over the 4 points of why we can trust the Buddha in the first Thursday evening. And so that's the first aspect. You moved out of compassion. You eliminate wrong views, meaning all our afflictions. There's a second line, right? The first line is you moved out of compassion. It explains the motivation of the Buddha. Yeah. And then the second line in this verse by Ari Nagarjuna praising the Buddha is you who eliminate wrong views, meaning not you right and I'm, no, sorry, you wrong and I'm right, or something like that. It's wrong views in our minds, right? The destructive emotions, as we talked about, are all misunderstandings of reality. Yeah, they're not in accordance with reality. Yeah, that anger overestimates the faults, attachment overestimates the qualities, and that's why we end up in so much trouble all the time, because we, you know, we misunderstand reality and then believe those kind of afflictions, and that's why there's a problem, you know. So then Nagarjuna said, you moved out of compassion, you eliminate wrong views, you're teacher of the sublime Dharma. Yeah, so teacher of the sublime Dharma is referring to the teachings on dependent origination. Yeah, we talked about already a few times that emptiness is very essential, right? We talked about that the realization of emptiness is really the real refuge, so to say, yeah. And in particular, the direct perception of emptiness is what we call the true paths. Yeah, among the refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, we said the Buddha is a teacher, the Dharma is the actual refuge, right? So, and then among the various types of Dharma or teachings of the Buddha, then the actual refuge of the Dharma is in your own mind. Yeah, a mind that is free of afflictions. That's the real safe direction, as we talked about, right? And to have a direct perception of emptiness to accomplish that. Yeah. So how do you accomplish a direct perception of emptiness? By understanding that everything is in the nature of dependence. Everything is depending upon each other, right? So nothing can exist from its own side. Yeah, we went over already a few times that the root of all these afflictions and suffering is this holding on to or grasping at an I or a self that seems to exist from its own side, but actually it does not exist the way it appears. Yeah, but when we get angry, that's first this sense of an I, right? How dare this person say this to me? I'm not like this, you know? Or when we get strong desire, I need this, I need that. And we don't think about anything else, but only about ourselves, right? So that kind of, that strong sense of an I, and then make that very concrete, is basically a cause for all these forms of afflictions to arise and suffering to arise. So we have to counteract that with an understanding of that it does not exist the way it appears. Yeah, that I appears very solid when you get angry or when strong desire arises, you know, but actually nothing exists that's solid. Yeah, it appears very independent, but actually nothing exists independent. Everything is depending on something else than itself, as we say, you know. So that being the case, by understanding dependent origination, we will understand emptiness. And by understanding emptiness, we will able to eliminate all suffering. Yeah. So that's kind of, we go into emptiness in great detail in the model on emptiness itself, but, you know, just get you ready a little bit for that aspect to understand a little bit the importance of emptiness, you know. And then we can see with scientists, same thing. I mention often David Bohm or Carlo Rovelli, exactly the same thing. They understand by the power of quantum mechanics, they understand how reality is and come to the same conclusions. There is no independent entity anywhere. And even David Bohm mentions there is no self-identity, or there is no self as such, the way it appears. The way it appears, he says, is just a show. It's not really there, but a very convincing show. That's what he says, right? And that's why people take it as an apparent reality, he says, you know? Yeah. So yeah, here Nagarjuna says, you Buddha, yeah, moved out of compassion, you eliminate wrong views, you teacher of the sublime Dharma, to go down Buddha, I pay homage. Yeah, so for those teachings, I go for refuge in the Buddha, right? That's kind of, because those teachings are really helping us to eliminate suffering. And then the real actual refuge is in your own mind, to be free of afflictions, as we said, and to have these realizations to come to that aspect. So we went over those points yeah, quite a few times. So I was thinking today to do a short meditation, because it's also good to contemplate these aspects rather than just me sitting there, blah, 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 and you just listen and then you make some notes. It's good to analyze, right? So if we do some analytical meditations here, every, probably every module, we try to do at least one, yeah, then you get a little bit idea how to do it, right? And then it's advisable to, when you're by yourself, to also try to contemplate things. Yeah, so don't read the suggested readings or whatever thing you like to read around a topic like a novel, like, oh yeah, interesting, oh yeah, makes sense, oh interesting, oh makes sense. That doesn't, it's not a much benefit. It's benefit there, but it's better to read one page at a time and think, does this make sense? Is this true or not? Yeah, that's a very important aspect of the Buddhist teaching, examine and then come to a conclusion. And then if you're convinced after examining it, it's much stabler, right? So that's very important to analyze correctly and come to a conclusion. That's we do in analytical meditation. And then you focus on that conclusion, and that gives you an insight, right? Because we have the wisdom from hearing while listening to the talks and reading the material. That's the wisdom from hearing, right? That's important. You need to have the information, but it's not a very stable one, as we say. Yeah, it's very easy to be led astray and yeah, it's all interesting, but it's also difficult, so let's put it aside. Yeah, and then you put all these trainings aside, and then actually life is still difficult, but there's no progress because you have put the method aside, right? So it's important to contemplate that method. Does it work? And if so, how? That's a very important aspect to make clear for yourself. So the wisdom from hearing is not very stable, because we can, let it go and say, yeah, okay, it's nice, but it's all difficult, and let's put it aside, So you need a more stable form of wisdom, right? And then the wisdom from contemplation, the second one, is much more stable. Yeah, that you analyze and say, oh yeah, maybe it's like this, or maybe it's like, oh, this makes sense because of this and this reason. So then you come to a conviction, and that is why the wisdom from contemplation is very, very important. It's much stabler. And then you reach a kind of conclusion, yeah, after analyzing things well, and then you focus on that conclusion, and that gives you a very stable imprint or a stable insight in what we call the wisdom from meditation. So the wisdom from meditation is the most stable form of insight we can get. And that means we have to first get the information, then we analyze, we come to a conclusion, and you focus on that conclusion, right? So that's kind of what really moved the mind in a particular direction. Yeah, in the beginning of this course, we went over the antidotes to the destructive emotions, exactly the same thing. Yeah, you contemplate the faults of anger, for example. Yeah, for some time you come to a conclusion, you focus on that conclusion, then you think about the benefits of practicing patience, you analyze, come to a conclusion, and focus on that conclusion, and that will shift your mind. Yeah? And also you get an insight you will remember throughout the day. Yeah, what we talked about, mindfulness is a very important mental factor, and mindfulness only really works when you have an object you're familiar with. Yeah, so that means the more you contemplate these things, the more you come to a conclusion, and you focus on that conclusion, the stronger your mindfulness will be throughout the day. Much easier to practice patience. Yeah, so that's kind of why these techniques of contemplation and meditation are very, very essential. Yeah. So I was thinking maybe today let's do the two courses of going for refuge, right? That we went over. That one of the courses is seeing that, we have suffering, and the suffering is caused by karma and afflictions. Yeah, that because of the afflictions like anger and strong desire, yeah, we get suffering. Yeah, so try to see that aspect as being the cause for suffering. Yeah, or the fear, so to say, to be free of suffering and their causes. Yeah, and then the second part is then to see that the three jewels, and in particular, the Dharma has the method to eliminate these afflictions. Yeah, by applying the antidotes, and in particular, seeing that all those afflictions like anger and strong desire and jealousy and pride and low self-esteem, depression, fear for unconstructive form of fear. It's all rooted in this sense of an I. Yeah, so that's another aspect. So if you take that way, then you have the real freedom. Yeah, so so we break the meditation into two aspects, yeah, of the two courses for going for refuge, for fear of the suffering and seeing the potential of generating faith in the potential of the three jewels, and in particular the Dharma jewel, to help us to get out of samsara or to stop suffering. Yeah, is that clear? More or less, yeah. Okay, so then before we do the actual analytical meditation, first we do some placement meditation, yeah, on the counting of the breath, as we did previously. So that means that you, you're gonna count every in-breath as 1 and out-breath as 2, and then you count from 1 to 10, and then start over counting. Yeah, and make sure, as we said before, have the two mental factors, alertness and mindfulness, present. As soon as your mind gets distracted, you think about things of the last few hours or this day, you analyze, you recognize that with alertness, and with mindfulness, you bring your mind back to the counting of the breath, right? The actual method we should be focusing upon, or the object of concentration. Yeah, so let's do that for about let's say a minute or two. Yeah, just the counting of the breath from 1 to 10, and then start over counting. Yeah, so do that for about a minute or two. All right, so then when the mind is settled down a bit, then imagine in front of yourself, the level of your eyebrows, about the body's length away, there's, if you like to visualize, Sakyamuni Buddha. There's a throne supported by snow lions, and on top of that throne is a lotus, sun and moon disk. And on top of this is seated Sakyamuni Buddha in the full lotus position, right hand on his right knee touching the moon disk, left holds a begging bowl filled with nectar, and he wears the robes of a fully ordained monk and has a very golden body, so to say, made out of light, and has a very peaceful and smiling face, yeah, and kind of a crown protrusion on top of his head. So try to build up that image for yourself of the Buddha in front. And then imagine surrounding yourself are the individual sentient beings in human aspect, undergoing the various types of suffering, and see that all this suffering is caused by karma and afflictions. That's all rooted in this ignorance of grasping at a self or an I. So think it's your responsibility to do something about those suffering sentient beings, and for that purpose you want to train your mind in refuge, and for that purpose you make request to the Buddha in front, and then the Buddha is very pleased with your request, and from his heart comes white nectar light to your crown and to the crown of all sentient beings surrounding yourself, and this purifies all negative karma, all negative thoughts, all forms of suffering. So think, by receiving this white light from the heart of the Buddha to your crown, filling your whole body, think you purify all those negativities. So let's do that visualization for about a minute or so. Yeah. And then think you completely filled with this white nectar light and completely purified. All negativities are completely gone. And then with the same intention again, I want to help those beings surrounding yourself to teach them the path, to eliminate suffering. You make requests to the Buddha again, and this time it's a kind of golden yellowish nectar light that comes from the Buddha to the crown of all sentient beings surrounding yourself, and also comes to your own crown. By receiving this golden yellowish nectar light filling your body, you imagine you get all those insights of the Buddha, of love and kindness, compassion, in particular wisdom, so think that you receive those realizations by this golden nectar light. So also this visualization we do for about a minute or so. And then think you completely filled with this yellowish golden nectar light, and the mind is completely suitable to get the insights, particularly the insight into refuge. I think that has been established. And then we do the analytical meditation. So try to take an event out of your daily life and see when the mind was really disturbed by anger. You know, you got irritated with a person or a situation, and then you said something wrong to that individual or individuals, you know, and then you feel very uncomfortable by it all, and your mind is really disturbed. So you see there's a kind of a suffering there, right? And then also try to see that this anger was rooted in a sense of an I, maybe something you wanted to protect, or you disagreed with somebody, you know, because you said, how, you know, the I comes up, and that this I strongly says, like, how dare this person say this to me? I didn't do that, or I didn't do those things, or I don't have those mistakes, you know. So see that this I comes up very strongly, and because of that, get irritated, and that because of that we say something wrong, because the mind is unclear, and then we regret maybe later on, or our mind is disturbed for the rest of the day or evening or night even. And see the correlation between that this anger produces a kind of suffering, as well as it's rooted in the sense of an from its own side existing self or I that you want to protect, or, you know, that actually made this anger stronger. So try to see the correlation between those two things, yeah, the I, anger, and the suffering that arises from that. So analyze that if that's really true for yourself for, let's say, about 2 minutes or so. And try to see here with a little conclusion that the disturbance of mind and saying something wrong and that caused disturbance in others was rooted in this anger or this hatred, so to say. You know? And that was actually rooted in this sense of a self, very concrete sense of a self. You know, so see those two aspects there, and then think that is something that is unwanted, right? That is kind of something that should be abandoned, so to say, or eliminated. Yeah, so come to that conclusion and focus on that conclusion for about half a minute. And then try to see that in the Dharma, we have these kind of methods to, transform this anger with the practice of patience. And even more than that, we have a method to understand ultimate reality that eliminates this grasping or holding on to this concrete I or self. So that's actually analyze that. If you apply those methods, then these afflictions become less, like anger, and that is causing less suffering, right? You take away the cause for suffering, so to say. And so analyze if that's really true for yourself for about a minute or two. And also here, try to come to a conclusion, seeing that, these methods in the Dharma, they actually lead us beyond this suffering. It's actually a real methodology to actually eliminate these afflictions and eliminate the root of these afflictions. So that's by itself is something to generate a kind of faith in, as we discussed the different types of faith, that we have to generate a kind of faith of conviction in the possibility of transforming the mind, and the ability to eliminate those afflictions and the root of those afflictions. And that's something really to strive for. So come to that conclusion that that's actually something to be obtained. That's the real safe direction in your mind to be free of these afflictions and their causes, right? So come to that conclusion and focus on that conclusion for about half a minute. And then to conclude, and think that the Buddha comes to the crown of your head and then facing the same direction as you are facing, and becomes smaller and smaller. And then the throne dissolves into the lotus, and then become even smaller, like the size of your thumb, and then descends to your crown, throat, and then think that the qualities of love and kindness, compassion and wisdom actually of the Buddha become one with your own mind. So when the Buddha descends, and think Buddha made it out of light, dissolves at the level of your heart and becomes one with your own mind. So think you can feel a little bit bliss there or happiness, and think actually that the Buddha's qualities merge completely with your own mind. All right, so then we can stop. Did we talk about fate? That was in EB, but did we do it here? in discovering Buddhism, the different types of fate? I don't think so, no? It was an EB, no? Because the causes for refuge, yeah, as we know, is one is the fear of the suffering, and the other one is the fate, in that the three jewels have the potential to lead you beyond that suffering. Yeah, remember? That we discussed, no? And that we discussed the going for refuge in relation with the three scopes of the Lamrim, right, last week. So yeah, let's, before we do the actual topic of today, because that fate is very essential to be understood well. Yeah, in Buddhism, we don't really believe in blind fate, you know. Fate is based on reasoning, yeah. And the fate here, where we talk about, is this, yeah, maybe you can write down if you want to, there's three types of fate we talk about in the Buddhist doctrine, you know. And you can see all those three types of fate are based on reasoning, you know. The first one is the fate of conviction. Yeah, so being convinced about something. Yeah, so the fate of conviction is a very essential, important aspect in the whole Buddhist path, you know. For example, if you see that that what we just meditated a little bit upon, that by the power of this holding on to an eye, and we did one example, right? I count to three, everybody gets angry, 1, 2, 3, and then nobody gets angry. And then I say, look at your hair, look at your tattoo, look at your glasses, and then people get all uptight, you know? So you can see it's related with a sense of an eye, yeah? So then you see there's this strong sense of an eye, then there's this irritation of anger or hatred, and then there's this disturbance in the mind, yeah? So to see the correlation between the cause of suffering and suffering, then you generate fate in that reality, right? And that's what we call the fate of conviction. You understand things by analyzing, and you get convinced, yeah, that's how it is, you know? In a similar way, if you then think, okay, if you take away the afflictions, yeah, then there's only happiness left. There's no causes for suffering, right? So you analyze that aspect, you know. If you take away the afflictions, then you can you actually achieve nirvana, right? That's a question, you know. Can you generate a continuity of consciousness without afflictions, you know? So that you analyze, right? And then you come to a conclusion that it's possible because you can take the root away of afflictions, yeah? So then you generate this conviction in the possibility of liberation. You see that? Yeah, so that's kind of a fate based on reasoning, right? You analyze and you say, okay, that's possible because of this and this reasoning. And then you generate fate in that aspect of liberation or nirvana, right? In a similar way, if you think about if you generate the mind of bodhicitta, right? We will discuss more later on in another model on bodhicitta, but to want to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, yeah, you see the possibility of eliminating afflictions, you see the possibility of working for the benefit of others and to help others also to do the same. So you see the possibility of achieving enlightenment, right? Yeah, so that is also a fate of conviction. You see that? Yeah, so His Holiness Dalai Lama and many other masters, they always say, you know, if you contemplate ultimate reality or emptiness again and again, you think, wow, nirvana is possible because you can take away the root cause of afflictions, right? So that's kind of what we call the fate of conviction. Yeah, you have we said we have the fear from the suffering. We don't want the suffering, a constructive form of fear, right? As we discussed, and the fate in the three jewels that they can help us to eliminate that fear or to eliminate that suffering. And that fate in the three jewels is just what we just talked about, is this fate in the Dharma jewel, right? That you see those methods, if you put them into practice, they work and they can accomplish a state beyond suffering. Yeah, so that's kind of what we call the fate of conviction. Yeah, that we analyze to the power of reasoning. Yeah, that makes sense or not? Yeah. There's a fate of conviction. There's the first level of fate. Yeah. The second level of fate, you can think about the clarifying fate, or fate that gives clarity to the mind. Yeah, the first one is giving you a conviction in the understanding. The second one gives clarity to the mind. If you think about the qualities of the Buddha, for example, as we talked about last week, you know, the Buddha's qualities of omniscience, the Buddha's qualities of compassion, and the Buddha's qualities of ability to help beings in various ways, and very skillful. Yeah. So if you think about the qualities of the Buddha, for example, or in traditional way of our teachers, yeah, sometimes we talk about stories, very positive stories about Lama Zopa Rinpoche or other great masters, then it's very uplifting. It's the mind becomes, there's a kind of clarity that comes to the mind, you know. And that's also true in ordinary conversations, right? If you talk about the politics and the bad news on the news, then the mind gets not really happy. Yeah. But if you talk about somebody does something good in the world and you think, oh, wow, that's amazing. And you talk about how a particular person helps society or helps a kind of a particular group of people somewhere on the planet, then you think, wow, that's amazing. It's very uplifting, right? So that's kind of what we call clarifying fate. Yeah, you generate a fate in the qualities of others, basically. Yeah? Fate by thinking about the qualities of others, and then because of that aspect, you generate fate number three, which is kind of the wishing fate. Yeah. So if you're convinced with the fate of conviction about the possibility of liberation and enlightenment, yeah, by thinking about the cause and effect relationships, yeah, you get a fate of conviction in the possibility of eliminating afflictions and achieving nirvana, for example, right? So that's the fate of conviction. Then you think about the qualities of nirvana, being free of afflictions, right? And then that gives this clarity to the mind of this clarifying fate that you see, wow, to have a mind without afflictions, that's quite something. Yeah. So then you get very kind of, wow, amazing. You know, they get a very uplifting aspect of this clarifying fate. Yeah. And then you think, oh, actually, I would like to accomplish that. Yeah, you generate a kind of wishing fate. Yeah, so all those three types of fate, fate of conviction, clarifying fate, and the wish to accomplish nirvana, yeah, wishing fate, or accomplish enlightenment, yeah, the wishing fate, is all based on reasoning, right? It's not blind fate. Yeah, it's that they can see. That is, yeah, in Buddhism we talk about, yeah, fate based on reasoning, generally speaking, you know, in this kind of context of the training. Yeah, is that be clear, the three types of fate? Yeah. So then, yeah, we go to the topic I was planning to discuss today. So this is the last evening. It's not the last evening, but for for this cycle of next week is the Gaza. You never know it's the last evening, actually. I just say that so like it's not last evening, but you don't know if it's the last evening or not, right? There's no guarantee. You know, there's nobody in this room or online or in the rest of the world can guarantee that we're gonna be there tomorrow, right? That's pretty clear. You know? So yeah, if it's not, if we still are around, then then we can meet next week, and there will be the review and discussion. Right? So this is the last, yeah. So I have to go to a few more topics or points. Yeah. So another aspect is the measure of having generated refuge. Yeah. So if you really are convinced about the cause of suffering, yeah. So that's why the Four Noble Truths will be discussed not next model, but the model after that. It's a very essential teaching of the Buddha, right? If you, without the Four Noble Truths, this all doesn't make much sense. You need to understand the Four Noble Truths in great detail. And then if you understand the Four Noble Truths well, so that's why it's, you know, the Lamrim, as we have in Discovering Buddhism, is one topic or one model is enhancing the other ones, right? It's not all 13 models, 30 individual standalones, right? It all relates to each other. Yeah. So the more you study about the suffering of samsara, yeah, the stronger your refuge becomes. Yeah, if you really understand the suffering of samsara is rooted in this sense of an I, and that produces afflictions, and that produces this contaminated law of cause and effect we call karma, and we stuck into that, and then you generate a fear to not be born in that. You want to get out of that cycle, yeah, so you want to get rid of that forms of suffering. So that means the fear for suffering become only stronger the more you understand suffering. That's pretty clear, right? In a similar way, to see that the three jewels, and in the particular, the Dharma jewel has the potential to to help you to eliminate the afflictions. Right? So the more you understand the Dharma jewel, the stronger that fate will be in the fate of conviction, right? So that means the more you study these topics, the stronger the refuge becomes, right? Then eventually you get this refuge that how would say that that you know, every moment of the day or night you think about to leave samsara, right? For that purpose, practice the Dharma. You know? So then, if you really contemplate these points again and again, and later on we go into more detail, that you see there's no I, so there's only a body and a mind and contaminated causality, right? Nothing else. It's very scary in one way, you know, that there's no self to hold on to, like, oh, I get sick, oh, I just hold on to this I and then I'll be fine. That doesn't exist, right? Yeah, so that's in one way it's very scary. We come to that later, but that generates a kind of real genuine form of, oh, you know, I better get my act together, because it's quite a kind of how to say, contaminated aspect. Then we are overpowered. What we say, the power is not with us, or the control is not with us. The control is with karma and afflictions. Yes, we talked about many times. When you get sick, you don't want to get sick, but it happens to you. When you don't want to die and you die, you cannot prevent it, right? So that means getting sick or dying or getting depressed. When you don't want to get depressed, of course, it sometimes is completely beyond our control. Yeah, so that's what we call the power of karma and afflictions. Yeah, so the more you understand that aspect, and that is all rooted in this sense of a self, the more you get this kind of constructive form of fear. I have to do something about this. Yeah, and then when that's kind of a kind of 24/7 spontaneous kind of realization, then you get actually what we call, you know, the real realization of refuge. Yeah? So that only comes after contemplating the lamrim back and forth again and again and again. And at one point of time is kind of I wouldn't say you don't feel at ease anymore, because it's maybe a negative quotation, but you know, you're not that interested in the normal things in life that much anymore. Let's put it that way, you know, because you really see that there's much more that is of more importance, you know. Yeah. Same with people who have a near-death experience. You can see their life completely changes, right? So that's a very strong insight. So yeah, so we don't have that. I mean, I don't know, maybe one or two, or some people have that experience, but if you don't have that experience before, then you have to use this reasoning to come to that idea that you're going to die, and you know, there's not much time left, and the cycle is beyond control, so better do something about it, right? So that's kind of how we are stuck in samsara, but want to do something about it. And then you generate, wow, yeah, I really have to get rid of these afflictions before it's too late. Yeah, and then you generate such a strong, when that's kind of spontaneous, yeah, then you get a really strong form of refuge, you can imagine, right? So that's kind of the real refuge. Yeah? The real refuge is not just making prayer in the temple. Like, you know, yeah, in Buddhism, we have the same thing as we used to do in Christianity. When I only started to read the Bible after I became a Buddhist, you know that? So before I was a Buddhist, because my parents were not that regular in church, but once upon a time I went myself, just check things out, right? And then, yeah, you do things in church, you make, you know, go Sunday and then come back. In Buddhism, you have the same thing, you know, people in certain Southeast Asia countries, they go to the temple, make some incense offering, Nama Amatafu, and then they go home, and that's it for the rest of the week, you know, the rest of, yeah, you know. So that by itself is good to make a connection with Buddha Amitabha, but it's not really the real refuge, right? The real refuge is to train to understand suffering and do something about it. Yeah, that's kind of very important. And for that purpose, you have to contemplate and study the Lamrim. Yeah, so that's very important. So when this is then kind of a spontaneous insight in, wow, I really have to do something about this, because you know, never know when the time comes to die, and I'm not in control of my mind. So what happens after I'm dying is just my consciousness just follows karma and afflictions, nothing else. So now is the time to do something, as we went over the present rebirth and death and impermanence before. So then you think, wow, yeah, I have to get my act together, you know. And then you go into, you know, the real refuge, so to say, you know. Yeah. So that's kind of a measure of seeing if you generate a refuge. Okay. So then refuge, as we said, is mainly from within, right? We said Buddhist means inner being. Yeah. A Buddhist, a person who is a Buddhist is kind of inner being. So the real refuge is from within oneself, from one's heart, or whatever you like to call it, is understanding the suffering and want to be free of those sufferings, right? And look for the methods and having faith in this method. Yeah, and in particular, the Dharma jewel. Yeah? So that's the real refuge, right? But there's also an aspect of formally taking refuge. Yeah, so when we have the prayer on the prayer we recite every day on the prayer, the Sangye Chödan Sogni Sonamla, right? That verse you can recite 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the evening, for example, if you want to take refuge. Yeah, so that by itself is a kind of a refuge from your own side. Yeah, there's also a possibility to make refuge more formal for yourself. If you checked well the Buddhist doctrine, yeah, it's always most important to follow the religion or faith from your forefathers or culture or whatsoever. But yeah, if there's individuals, including myself, who just saw by the power of reasoning and analyzing that, you know, okay, I feel, you know, that this teaching is really something for me, right? So that means Buddhism is not the perfect form of faith for everybody, right? Yeah, so we cannot have one form of faith for all 8 billion now, I think, on the planet, 8 billion people on the planet, right? That doesn't exist, because everybody has their own kind of inclinations and interests and minds. And, you know, so we should always have respect for any form of faith, because they bring benefits to society, to individuals. Yeah. And Buddhism is not the perfect fit for everybody. That's clear. But if there are individuals who examine the Buddhist doctrine very carefully, that's very important. And then after a certain period of time come to the conclusion, actually, I want to take my refuge formal, then that's possible. Yeah, so that's kind of a way to actually go for refuge in a kind of ceremony or something like that. Right? So then you can request a teacher or a preceptor, so to say, as we call it, to actually formally take refuge. Yeah, that's an opportunity or possibility to do that. It's a very short kind of ceremony for just, you know, with explanations. It can be done in half an hour or 40 minutes, or yeah, it depends. It can be done in 3 minutes if you want to. Yeah, but it's nice to do it a bit more elaborate, right? Yeah. So that's a way to, if people feel ready, and it's very important to take time for these things and analyze things, then that opportunity is there. Let's put it that way, right? So that's kind of, but the real refuge is from within, right? But you can make it formal if you wish. Yeah, so that's what we call, yeah, making refuge formal in the form of a ceremony with a teacher or a preceptor, so to say. Yeah. So if you planning to take that step, then we go to the next point, because it's also part of the traditional explanation. Yeah, that on the little write-up or booklet I made for you, just 3 pages that you can read, right? Yeah. I hope you also read the suggested reading, because the more you read, the reading by itself, if you read carefully and you take your time, is actually kind of meditation, right? Some people say, yeah, I don't want to study too much. I want to practice. You know, if you hear a person saying like that, then it indicates that the person didn't most likely really understand what study actually means and what practice actually means. Yeah, because if you read a particular text on the Lamrim and you contemplate and you think about it, and that moves your mind, that's actually practice, right? Yeah, so there's no kind of practice and study as being 2 separate things. Lama Tsongkhapa, you know, he realized emptiness, of course, by doing all kind of purification practices and accumulation of merit, and then study, and then the supplications to the Buddha and the Guru, and then reading the great text, and then sitting down and contemplate, and then he realized emptiness, right? So that means that, because our mind, I don't know about your mind, but my mind is quite dull, you know. So when you try to meditate, then there's no clarity, a little bit like that. So then, but then if you read something that comes from an authentic lineage, then sometimes you read and you think about it, and it moves the mind quicker. Yeah, so that's kind of why, because meditation doesn't mean sitting there and have a mellow kind of mind. Like that. No, that's not real meditation, right? Meditation is to produce results. Yeah, so if it's a calm abiding, yeah, samatha, for example, or if it's an insight into vipassana meditation, into reality, right? So it means meditation is you have to put some effort, yeah, and that effort can only be done by having the correct knowledge and contemplating that knowledge. Yeah, so that's kind of important. Yeah. So why did I? Ceremony and done. Oh yeah, the 3 pages. Yeah, very good. The 3 pages. Yeah, so you have to read. You have to read, and then you contemplate, and then you start to understand. So don't read books like a novel, but read a few pages at a time and analyze it. Is this really true or not, and why? Then the mind moves in the understanding, right? Otherwise, you read, and then 2-3 weeks later, you think, what did I read again? Yeah. But if you read a few pages at a time and you think about it, and then on top of that, you discuss with others or talk about it with others, what we do here as well in the review discussion, question answer sessions, right? Or in the winter breaks, it's very important because you digest the material and it stays much longer, you know? Yeah. So then you retain the material much better, you know? Yeah. So yeah. So then we have made this booklet. So there are the benefits of going for refuge, as we discussed last week. So now, if you decide to make your refuge formal in the form of from your own side or in the form of this ceremony kind of aspect of formally taking refuge, right? Then there is commitments, I won't say. We say it's advice to be followed. Yeah, in the Lamrim, we call it labja. Yeah, labja is mostly, we say advised, advice. Sometimes it's been translated as precepts, you know, or refuge vows, but the refuge, there's no refuge vow as such. Yeah, it's more, but sometimes you read material and you might read refuge vow or refuge precepts, you know. But actually, yeah, that's one term, but it's actually kind of advice. Yeah, that's the real meaning in the, but you can, labja in Tibetan, you can translate in various ways. Yeah. So then on that, in that little write-up, I put a few things there from the great Lamrims. So there's advice in relation with the 3 jewels, for example. Yeah, there's advice in relation with the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So if you decide formally to take refuge, yeah, then there's advice to be followed to protect yourself and to make sure you go in the right direction. Yeah, so that's, the Buddha very skillfully says, okay, check it out, and if you decide, then try to do this and this and this to move forward. Right? That's what it is. Yeah, yeah. So there's things to give up and to practice, you could say. Yeah, so with the Buddha, if you take refuge in the Buddha, so what you try to give up, yeah, is you do not go for refuge in worldly deities, as we call it, or spirits. Yeah, in the Western culture, that's not really present that much, but in India and many Southeast Asian countries, some people take refuge in the spirit. I don't know, you did the spirit games with a glass on top of a candle, or with the two pieces of wood with a nail in the center, tick, tick, tick on the board of the alphabet, right? So those spirits, also some people advise against it, because sometimes you have a good spirit, but sometimes you might have invite a spirit that's not that nice, you know? And that can be harm, because spirits, as we say, we cannot really trust. Sometimes they might help, and some spirits have clairvoyance and they think, oh, wow, this spirit knows about my father or this, that, but that's not a big deal. Clairvoyance is not a big deal, right? But the motivation behind it all, that's important, right? So the Buddha, we say we can trust because it's motivated out of compassion and doesn't make a distinction between those who harm the Buddha and those who help the Buddha. and doesn't make a distinction between friends and enemies, as we discussed before. So we can trust. Yeah. So that means if you take refuge in the Buddha, you don't take refuge in worldly beings, so to say. Yeah, it's up to the individual taking refuge or not. But if you go for refuge, then that's the advice to be followed, right? So that's kind of one aspect. Yeah, that you don't take refuge in worldly beings, so to say. Yeah, because if beings are not that very well developed mentally, then maybe you cannot really trust them, or you know, so you need a person you can trust, right? Yeah. So that yeah, what you do with the Buddha. Then that's what to be given up, advice what to be given up. Then advice what to be practiced is to respect every image of the Buddha. Yeah, meaning a picture or an image. You know, sometimes we say, oh, there's a beautiful statue that's made out of gold. And this statue, yeah, I put it down there because it's just made out of wood, right? So that's not the right attitude, because every image of the Buddha, if it's made out of gold or made out of wood, both of them are exactly the same. They represent the qualities of body, speech, and mind, and qualities of love and kindness, compassion, and wisdom. So we should respect every image of the Buddha. So for those who take refuge, you always put the image of a Buddha on a respectful place, not in the toilet, or, you know, you have those people in the garden with the Buddha. It's very popular these days. You know, they put somewhere down in the dirt or something like that. Yeah. Or once I went to the Netherlands and I went to one library one day. I was yeah, there, and then it was around Christmas, and it was just heads of the Buddha sitting there next to some kaza. I would say. Yeah, I think Kazakh Christmas kind of decorations, you know. So I thought, ooh. So yeah, if you take refuge, if you become a Buddhist and take refuge, those people don't know, right? So then they don't know that this represents all these qualities. But if you take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, then you always, from the Buddha's point of view, you always have respect and put images, whatever represents these qualities of the Buddha, you put on a respectful place, clean and higher place. Yeah. So that's from the point of view of the Buddha. Then from the point of view of the Dharma, what you should abandon is abandoning harming sentient beings, right? You don't harm beings. If you take refuge in the Buddha, then the Dharma and the Sangha, then basically you promise to be a good human being and not harm others. Yeah, we always say, if you can benefit others, at least try not to harm others, right? That's the minimum a Buddhist practitioner should engage in, right? So if you take refuge in the Dharma, you don't harm others by whatever means, verbal or physically, or, you know. So yeah, that's kind of what you abandon. And what you should practice is that you respect every form of scriptures, you know, like this sheet of prayers, or laptops, or mobile phones, or iPads or tablets, whatsoever. If there's Dharma on it, don't put it on the floor, or step over it, or put it on low places, or put something on top. You know, some people, they put sometimes the mala on top of the book or something like that. You know, you don't do that. Even a stupa, you do not put on top of a book. You know, so that's kind of quite, because the Dharma, as we talked about, is the actual refuge, right? So these texts, by reading them, we transform the mind. So we should respect those texts. So we never put those texts on the floor or step over them. And even that includes mobile phones and yeah, these kind of gadgets. I mean, you know, because yeah, sometimes you have a lot of Dharma in there, or books, you know, so that should be respected. Yeah. The more you respect the Dharma, the more the Dharma will influence your mind, because our mind is already dull enough, right? So if you, on top of that, put things on top of your text or your Dharma books, for example, you don't put with your, whatever, the novels, yeah, romantic novels, or those violent, there's also novels about, no, like we see on the movies, right? So you don't put your Dharma books with those kind of novels. You put your Dharma books a bit higher, because they help our mind to be transformed, right? To become happier, all the way up to nirvana, right? So that's kind of why you put the Dharma books and Dharma text and like sheets with prayers, you always put on a respectful place, clean. And if you have an altar at home, then the Dharma books are always the highest. Yeah, so if you have an altar with a statue, yeah, of the Buddha or whatsoever, then the book should always go on top, or a bookshelf on top of the altar, something like that. Yeah, the books are, yeah, because because that's exactly what we're talking about. The Dharma is the actual refuge, right? By reading the books, we transform the mind. So that's for us the most superior form of objects. Yeah. 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 So that's kind of what to do in relation with the Dharma. Then what to do with the Sangha, the third jewel, what to abandon is don't be befriended with bad friends, you know. So bad friends, they don't walk around with horns on their head, as they say. Yeah. So that means, what are bad friends? Bad friends are people who like to take us away from virtue. For example, it's Thursday evening and you think, okay, let's go to discovering Buddhism, train my mind, become a happy human being. And then your friend said, no, come on, let's go to the pub and get drunk. Then, yeah, then you can think, is that really a friend I should go along with, or should I actually go to Jamyang? Yeah. So from a spiritual point of view, it's nothing wrong to go to the pub, but getting drunk is maybe not that constructive, right? Yeah. So that's kind of a thing you can consider. Yeah. To which people you hang out. So people who actually, we say, enhance afflictions in your mind. That's the most clearer definition. Those people, we should have compassion for them, of course, you know. And when we can talk with them and they benefit from them, we should do that, right? It's not that we should avoid those people, but if you get influenced by those people and then, oh yeah, true, yeah, Jamyang is so boring, let's go to the pub and get drunk. Then, then if you get influenced by those people, then you might be, you have to be more cautious. You see that? Yeah. So you should not abandon those people, but if you get too much influenced by them, then yeah, you should think twice. Yeah, is it clear? Yeah, it's quite clear, I think. You know, that the bad friends. Yeah, yeah. Don't tell them, right? Because they won't understand. Yeah. Yeah. If you go to the pub and you talk about what Namdak is talking about here, people think you're completely crazy, probably. Not everybody, but you know, yeah, some people. Okay, so that's what you abandon the Sangha. Yeah. And then what you should practice or is that you should respect the Sangha. So and it's for me always difficult to say because I'm a monk myself, but monks and nuns, they basically dedicate their life, right? They live in the vows and they dedicate to study and practice for the preservance of the Buddha Dharma, right? So that should be respected. So that's why mostly the monks and nuns always sit in front, and with meals, they always get first the food, right? And we see that in countries like Sri Lanka and Thailand is a part of their culture even. Yeah, so there's not, when I was in India, and in India, there some people pay respect. Yeah, they might not even be Buddhist, but because you're a spiritual person, they just go down and touch your feet, right? So the first time I felt very uncomfortable, I can tell you, you know. In the West, we don't do that, right? Yeah, I felt very uncomfortable, but then I thought, Namdak, you don't have any qualities, but, and I know that, but I know I have the vows, right? The vows for self-liberation. And yeah, I have 253 vows as a fully ordained monk. So I think, okay, they pay respect to my vows because they see I'm a monk. Okay, then that's fine. Yeah, so then it's easy not to generate pride or whatsoever. And that's why they would pay respect to, right? So that's kind of why we always respect the Sangha, because they commit themselves in a greater deal, right, to the spiritual part, you know. So that's why we respect the Sangha, and then the property of the Sangha, of the robes of the Sangha. We also normally, we don't step over it, you know, we always put respect to those things. Here in the West, we have all nice seatings, but if you go Tibet in India and to big teaching gatherings, it's like you sit like this sometimes, you know, and as the next person is here. Yeah, so then you prevent them stepping over Sangha properties or these kind of cloths they use to sit on, right? So that's kind of the respect towards the Sangha. Yeah. Okay, so that's the advice of what to abandon and advice what to practice in relation with the 3 jewels. That's also in that in the suggested readings you can find back, and also on page number 2 of the write-up you got. Yeah. Then there's also 6 general precepts or 6 general forms of advice. Yeah, that's on page number 3 of the little write-up. And that means that if you formally take refuge, then it says the first point is, by recalling the distinctions of the good qualities of the 3 jewels, go for refuge again and again. Yeah, if you want to go into a safe direction, the more you're convinced about the qualities, the more you will go in that direction, right? It's just kind of advice that helps us to keep going in the right direction. Yeah, so that's what we call recalling the qualities, yeah, and go for refuge again and again. Yeah, so the more we talked about the benefits last week, yeah, so you contemplate those benefits and think, why are those benefits there? What's the meaning of these benefits? And then you actually remember the qualities of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, in particular the Dharma, as we talked about quite a few times. And that helps you to keep going, right? The more you, it's true, right? The more we're convinced about the benefits of something, the more we engage into it, right? That's pretty clear, you know? Yeah. So there's the first one, recalling the qualities, and go for refuge again and again. Then the second point is by remembering the kindness of the 3 jewels, and also offer every food of drink you take, you offer to the Buddha. Yeah, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And you can offer to your own Buddhahood in the future, for example, right? So that means that we eat and drink quite a lot on a daily basis. So that's just to remind ourselves about things, right? So that's, the Buddha doesn't need the food, right? We know that, yeah, but it's just to remind ourselves, you know? So then what you mostly do, before you drink or before you eat something, you say 3 times Om Hum. Yeah, that's kind of a way to bless it. Yeah, Om Hum. And then you can do verses. Here we do a few verses during lunch, for example. You can get those verses if you want to, but you can do also mentally, right? If you sit in the pub and you drink something and you start chanting Om Hum Om Hum Om Hum Buddha Buddha, then people think you're crazy, right? So then you don't have to show it. We said Buddhism is an inner development, right? So you can just for yourself say Om Hum, nobody has to hear that, and then just visualize the Buddha quickly in front and offer it. Yeah, so that's whatever drink you take, or that just after you get used to it, you can do that in a second or 2, 3, right? Yeah, this can do very quickly. It's just to remind us again and again about the 3 jewels of refuge. Yeah, so recalling the kindness of the 3 jewels, and then yeah, offer your first portion of food or drink before you start drinking, right? Or before you start eating is the best, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's another precept, yeah, or advice, so to say. Then the third one is establish other living beings in this practice by considering them with compassion. That doesn't mean to convert people into Buddhism. Yeah, converting people into another religion is not very healthy. People always have to, from their own side, show interest and make the decision from their own side. Yeah, we cannot say, oh, you do this, you should do that. You know, if people have questions, you can explain. And if people are interested, you can explain a little bit more, but you cannot force people to follow a particular form of faith, right? That doesn't work, you know? Yeah, so it has to come from their own side. No, that's very clear. In Buddhism, it's very clear. We come to that later also with the vows, you know, that. So, but if people are interested, then we should help them in understanding the aspects of the mind training and the aspects of refuge, for example. Yeah. Because it says considering them with compassion, because you see, oh, if they train their mind, they will become happier human beings. So then you try to help them. Yeah, but don't force things on people. That doesn't work. You know, if you get some benefit out of these kind of talks and contemplations and thinking about these things, it doesn't mean that everybody gets the same benefit, right? Sometimes we get really something out of it and want to share with our friends. That happened to me also. And then my friends were not interested in, what are you talking about? So that doesn't work, you know. That's only when people show interest, you talk about it, otherwise just show a normal aspect and then they think, oh, those Buddhists are also just normal, right? Now it's a little bit more well known here. Yeah, there's one retreat center in the north, and then they went there, and it's kind of quite a remote area. So the locals first thought, wow, Buddhist, I hope they're not gonna dance on the street and sing songs with drums. But they met them as normal people. They think, oh, just like normal people. Yeah. So that's a good example, right? Normal people try to be kind, you know? Yeah. Okay. And establish others in living beings in this practice, considering them with compassion. Then number 4, whatever activity you engage in, purpose, you know, make offerings and supplication to the 3 jewels, or always remember the 3 jewels by whatever you. That's true, right? The more you think about the drawbacks of the afflictions and the benefits to be free of afflictions, the more you will train your mind, right? That's all this advice, as you can see, is all to help us to develop more, right? That's the purpose of it. Yeah. So whatever activity you engage in, always think about the 3 jewels and don't get too much attached to the worldly affairs, as we say. Yeah. We know this life is not going to last forever, so it's better to invest in the long-term benefits of future lifetimes, right? So that's kind of an aspect there. Yeah. Then after number 5, after you understood the benefits and examining it well and everything, then go for refuge 3 times in a day and 3 times at night. Yeah, that doesn't mean in the middle of the night or something like that. It's just this refuge prayer, as we recite the, you know, on the bottom part of the prayers, you know, the Sangye Chodan Tsokni Tsonamla. Also, as I put it in that write-up as well. That particular prayer you can recite 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the evening. Yeah, or you know, 24/7. It's just like the 3 times is just a number to remember, but you can also do it 7 times or 10 times or 11 times or 21 or, you know, 50 or whatever. It's just to remind ourselves about refuge, right? That's why we recite those prayers, you know. So 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the evening. And you see many religions do the same thing, you know. In the Islam, for example, they make the prostrations and the prayers a few times, you know, during the day. Even in the train, when we traveled in India with a train, then even I saw many people putting their mat down and make a prostration and pray, you know. Yeah. So we Buddhists, we have the same thing, right? We do 3 times in the morning, 3 times in the evening, you take refuge. Yeah. Yeah. So you don't have to go to particular directions because the Buddha is everywhere. So you just can take refuge like that. Yeah. So 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the evening. Yeah, that refuge prayer. Then maintain your refuge and do not forsake the 3 jewels, even at the cost of your life. So when people put a knife on your neck and say, you give up refuge, you say, no. No, joking. But that is very, for many people that will be quite strange, right? Yeah, but you know, if you really understand this well, you know, one life is not a big deal in Buddhist context, right? So lifetimes are much more important. So you never give up. That's what it means, right? Because your life is most precious. You know, your life you cherish the most, right? So that means that never give up refuge, because if you once have chosen for a particular good path, and you know that path is going to work, you're not going to give it up, even if it's getting difficult, right? So to train the mind is not easy, yeah. And then you practice patience for some time, for a few years, and think, oh, it's going quite well. And then this new person appears in your life, and there you go. You get irritated again. And then you think, oh man, all those years, forget it. Then is that clever or not? Because if you forget it and you put it aside, then you will not improve, right? It's good to recognize it and know you know, we're not perfect human beings. We make mistakes, right? So, but at least we're more aware of those mistakes than before. And we try our best to develop it, you know? So that's kind of what we say, Kasa. Don't give up at the cost of your life, right? Because it's better, as we always say, it's better to have difficulties in your life, but do something about it, than to have difficulties in your life and not doing anything about it, right? So that's kind of quite clear, you know. So that's here what it says. Don't give up, you know. Yeah, there was a song with Band-Aid, remember? Don't give up. It was from your time, it was in the 80s. No? Yeah. Yeah, I remember. Yeah. So the songs I remember, but Dharma is, yeah, it's more difficult. Yeah. But good. Oh, but good. Now you see Dutch comes through. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so never give up even at the cost of your life, right? So just keep going and have this courageous attitude. Yeah. And yeah, it's true. I mean, even one life is nothing compared to many lifetimes to come, right? So if you have a safe direction and you give that safe direction up for just one simple life, then it's not very clever, as we say. Yeah, so that's the background of it. Okay, so that's about going for refuge. Yeah. Then another thing I have to talk about, according to the instructions for a teacher for this model, is so remember when we went over the benefits, one of the benefits was that it's the basis for establishing vows. Yeah, and I said there's 3 types of vows: the vows for self-liberation or pratimoksha, the bodhisattva vow, and the tantric vows. Yeah. So if you, the first step for those who are really serious with these things, or serious, I mean, want to go in the direction of developing the mind to its, you know, liberation and enlightenment, yeah, then you do first step is to, if you want to, is to formally take refuge, right? So to do it by a ceremony, you take refuge. That's the first step. The second step is, if you want, you can also train in vows. Yeah. So what is the purpose of training in morality or in vows is there's a great benefit there. Why? Because, for example, killing a mosquito. Yeah. So if you just the mosquito comes and you do like this, and you almost, because of your habits from before, you want to kill the mosquito, but then you come to Jamyang and they tell you not to kill living beings, right? So then you, oh, I shouldn't kill. You know, that by itself is good. Yeah. Yeah, because the mosquito also has feeling. That's why it flies away. It sees there's danger of life, right? So if you, that's a good act, not to kill. But if you promise from now until tomorrow, for example, I will not engage in killing, then when the mosquito is not there, still the virtue is being produced, right? Yeah, so there's kind of 8 Mahayana precepts. We can talk about it in the next model of establishing daily practice, for example. There's a way to, for 24 hours, to practice morality, if you want to, not killing and not stealing, no sexual misconduct, not lying about spiritual attainments, for example, right? So there are practices like that that you can promise for a particular period of time not to engage in negativities. Yeah, you can also promise that for the rest of your life with what we call the pratimoksha vow. Yeah, so the vows for self-liberation, yeah, with you have the vows for a layperson, you have the vows for monks and nuns. Yeah, we're not making, we're not planning to make monks and nuns of you, but you know, over time, if people have interest, then we can talk about it. But it's very important to check. Yeah, that's very important. But the first step after refuge is then establishing the vows for a layperson. Yeah, so there are 5 vows for the layperson. Yeah, and you can take 1, 2, 3, 4, or all 5. Yeah, so that's kind of, you can, and also there you have to choose yourself if you can take it or not, or you cannot take it, and make a decision, right? It's all up to the individual. To take refuge is up to the individual. To take vows is up to the individual. Yeah, the Buddhas gave many possibilities or methods, and we can choose what fits our kind of interest and possibility. Yeah, so you can, as a layperson, you can first train in the lay vows, because if you train, for example, in not killing, yeah, then you promise from now until you die not to kill. Then even in your dreams, when you're not killing, or in daily life when there's no opportunity to kill, still that virtue is present, because it's an intention from now until I die, I promise not to kill, right? Yeah, and then in the lay vows, the actual vow is then not killing a human being, which is not that difficult to keep, right? So not killing a human being is not that difficult, right? Yeah, that's quite easy. And not stealing is also not too difficult, although we have to be careful with copyrights and downloading illegal movies, those kind of things, right? So not stealing, meaning if you steal something that is punishable on the law, that's the final conclusion in the Vinaya scriptures, then it's being considered act of stealing. So then not stealing, not engage in sexual misconduct, for example, having sexual intercourse with somebody else's partner without consent. So that creates problems, right? It's harmful. So that's also an aspect to it. Kaza. And not lying, and then lying in particular about spiritual attainments, saying you have realized emptiness while you have not, or saying you have calm abiding while you have not. It's not that difficult to keep, right? And then that's the 4 root vows, so to say. If you want to know more about it, we can send you a few links or a few things to read about it. There's some very good material available, but have to know where you have to look, and so we can give you if you're interested. And then that's the 4 root vows, and then the 5th is abandoning intoxicants. So that means alcohol, all kind of drugs that makes you lose conscientiousness. So when in the tradition they say, because there's a habit of drinking with meals and everything like that, but then the final conclusion is like what His Holiness Dalai Lama always says is, don't get drunk. So that's the final conclusion. Or you could say whatever is, when you measure, when the police is measuring, I think you can have 1 glass of thinking right like that. So maybe that's a good kind of, because the more you drink, the more you lose conscientiousness, and you do all kind of things, right? So that we try to prevent. So that's the 5 vows for a layperson in short. But if you're interested, let us know. We can give you some more information about it. So you can decide to take 1 of those 5, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5. That's the vows for a layperson. So first you take refuge. I'm just talking the spiritual path to liberation and in morality, right? So first you take refuge, then you take the 5 vows for a layperson, then you train in those vows for a layperson, and then if you're interested, no, I shouldn't say that. Maybe, why not? If you're interested, you can eventually become a monk and a nun, right? That's also possible, but it's very good to check well. You don't make that decision overnight. You think about that very well. So, and also what you do after, and check with your teacher. It's very important to check back and forth. And then for those who are interested, there's also a sequence of pre-novice, novice, and then in training and fully ordained. There's also steps in that process, so that's anyway, that's just to make the picture complete, right? That's one of my responsibilities too. I'm not gonna give sales talks about these aspects, but people have to know. It's good to know, because a part of the tradition and the Lamrim. But it's all up to the individual. You never can be forced to do these things. You always have to think about yourself, because even in the vows for the ordained, the monks and nuns, there's a questionnaire. The person will ask you various questions before you actually accept it. You have to be accepted. And one of the questions is, did you choose this decision yourself? Are you not forced by others? So that you have to answer in a way that you choose yourself and you're not forced by others. Otherwise, you're not allowed to take ordination. So that's quite clear that you have to check these things out yourself. But you don't have to take lay vows. You don't have to take refuge. You can just study Buddhism, right? You can study it, put it into practice. That also should be clear, that you can study it, practice it without formally being a Buddhist. My mother is very similar, because her son is walking around like this. He's not completely crazy. She knows that. So she, but she says she reads, and she has a little altar, but she never really formally took refuge, So that's fine. So that's also up to the individual. But if you contemplate the benefits and feel ready, then there's this possibility of going for refuge with a ceremony, and then establishing the vows if you want to or not later on. That's 2 different aspects. That's just the last thing I was planning to talk about today. Very auspicious thing to talk about, because morality is a very important aspect of the training, right? To practice or commit yourself not to harm others. That's a very important. That's what morality is all about, right? Yeah. And another aspect of morality is that you live in accordance with the law of cause and effect. Yeah, this law of cause and effect is something that exists and we cannot change. So then the Buddha said, better live in accordance with that law. Yeah, as we talked about many times before, that the CO2 heats up the planet. The more CO2 there is in the atmosphere, heats up the planet. That reality we cannot change, but we can prevent, ourselves from pushing more CO2 in the atmosphere. Yeah, we can play with the law of cause and effect. We cannot change it. So same with the law of cause and effect within the continuity of the person, that anger produces suffering, for example, we cannot change that reality, but we can prevent ourselves from getting angry. In a similar way, we can prevent ourselves from harming others, and then we prevent ourselves from creating negative karma. Yeah, so that's kind of why morality is quite an essential aspect of the Buddhist path. It's kind of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who walks, who used to be like 24/7. It's like no sleep. Can you imagine? No sleep, but maybe sometimes 10-15 minutes. That's it. No sleep. So that's quite impressive. Some people checked it out. They didn't believe. They went to check it out. So if you with Rinpoche for a few weeks, this is very special. So, but then Rinpoche always doing things for others. And then his attendant Venerable Roger asked once, doesn't Rinpoche has to relax? And then the conversation went further. And then he asked Rinpoche, what is actually relaxation for Rinpoche? And then Rinpoche said, it's something very interesting. He said, living in morality is relaxation. Because if you live in morality, you don't have to worry too much, because you live exactly according to the law of cause and effect, and you don't harm others. So you don't create negative karma. So you don't create causes for suffering, and you create causes for happiness all the time. Yeah, so that's a very interesting quote, right? That you see the importance of morality is quite interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's we come to that back later on, maybe also. Yeah, the benefits of morality. Yeah. Okay. So let's stop there, because we're already over time, and there might be a few questions. Yeah.
Again, there's one question from last week we didn't have time for. So, with taking Bodhisattva and Pratimoksha vows, is it important to undergo the official ceremony, or is taking them personally also fine?
Yeah. So the Bodhisattva vows is a good question. The Bodhisattva vows, you can take yourself from an altar. You don't really have to have a preceptor as such. Although it's good to take it at least once from a preceptor. Yeah, that's also true for the Mahayana precepts. You can take without a preceptor from an altar or from a statue or image, but it's good to take it at least once from a preceptor to get the lineage. Yeah. The Pratimoksha vow, you cannot take from an altar. You have to take from a preceptor. Yeah, so there's a clear distinction between those two sets of vows. The Pratimoksha vows, you always have to take from a teacher, yeah, or a preceptor, as we call it. Yeah. And refuge is very similar to the Bodhisattva vows, because refuge you can take formally yourself without a preceptor. Yeah, but some people find it advisable to take it at least once from a preceptor to make it more formal, right? Because it's true, if you promise something and there's a witness, if you promise your friends you won't smoke anymore, and those friends are always with you, then when you see some, and then you say, well, my friends are here, and that helps you not to. So witnesses are very helpful sometimes. Yeah.
Keith, did you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the teachings, Mike Geshe.
Thank you.
I was wondering, how do you know when it's time to take refuge?
You probably know. No, how you know is it comes to natural kind of, if you really analyze and think, wow, this is really my part. You checked other forms of religions and faith, and then you think, oh, Buddhism is maybe not good for everybody, but for me it really suits, and I understand, and you study the advice that we just talked about, right? So read a little bit more about that in the more elaborate kind of commentaries of the Lamrim, right? And then think about it and see, wow, yeah, this is, for me, this is my part. Yeah, if you come to that conclusion, then you can decide. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Keith. Renato?
Yes, Geshe, thank you for your time and for your teaching, first of all.
Yeah.
My question is, sometime when you get to retreats or do Dharma classes like this one, we hear something like that, who have taken refuge, do that. Who didn't take a refuge, do that. Or who already have took a refuge, visualize that. Who not, just visualize it.
Yeah.
So what my question is, because it is for somebody that participate in the refuge ceremony, or for somebody that take refuge for in your heart.
Yeah. So both, right? I said before, refuge is basically from the heart. Yeah. But you can make it more formal in a ceremony, you know? So if you take it from the heart and you decide it for yourself, I take refuge. Yeah. It is very clear discriminating factor, as we call it. From now on, I take refuge, and you recite the refuge prayer, and you promise to take refuge from now until you die, right? And you promise to keep that advice. Yeah, you do it a little bit more formal for yourself, even if it's without a preceptor. Then you decide to take refuge, and then you should try to follow the advice that we just talked about. Yeah, but as I said before, if you have a preceptor or a teacher, then it makes the connection stronger, right? So that gives you a can give you a little bit more of yeah, I wouldn't say serious, but a more kind of, yeah, clearer direction, so to say. Because then it's clear. The thing is, then it's clear in your mind. It's more clear from the point of view of discriminating factor. Now I have taken refuge, you know? So if you just think, yeah, it makes sense, that's one aspect. But if you make it very formally for yourself, then it's also similar, right? If you, for example, put some offerings on the altar and make the 3 prostrations, recite a few prayers, and think, from now on, I'm going to take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. And I discriminating factor, I'm now become a Buddhist, right? And you recite a prayer 3 times, then it's clear in your mind. Yeah, that clarity is very important. And then you follow the advice. If you think, yeah, it's quite nice to be a Buddhist, and yeah, actually, maybe I should take refuge, or yeah, that's not very clear yet, you see? So you can either make it more formal for yourself, or you do it formal with a preceptor or a teacher. And then it's clear in your mind, okay, from now on, I've taken refuge. From now on, I'm a Buddhist. From now on, I follow these forms of advice. Does it help?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Renato.
Yeah.
Erin, you had raised your hand.
Hi. Thank you, Geshe, for the teaching. The question I had was the precept on non-killing. Where I live, there's toxic creatures that I have actually a severe allergy to their sting. And also my pets, they can be dangerous if your pets are, you know, stung also because they're small. And anyway, so if I don't put like bug spray around my house, they come in the house and everything.
Yeah.
So like what to do about a situation like that? I'd be interested to know your opinion.
Yeah. I mean, if you can catch those creatures and release them on the other side of a river or a boundary or something like that, that might be an option, right? When we were living in the monastery, we had a lot of cockroaches and other creatures as well. And we just, once upon a time, we just catched a lot of them and then liberate them, as we say. You know, so that's kind of, and we had also, yeah, other kind of, yeah, I don't know what kind of poisonous creatures you're dealing with, but we also have
there's scorpions.
Scorpions, yeah. So scorpions, they're not too difficult to catch, right? When I was in Dharamsala, there was also some scorpions, and they came in the bathroom sometimes. And yeah, they're not too difficult to catch, especially as they get a bit older. Yeah. Yeah, or like that. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of you know, with a little box or container or whatsoever, yeah, or with a stick, make sure they don't sting you. Yeah, then it's possible to, or snakes. We did the same in Gume Monastery. Poisonous snakes, we little ones, we just let them go into a bottle and then close the bottom and then put them over the fence. So there are methods to do that, right? Yeah. So yeah, maybe you can explore.
Okay, thank you so much.
Be careful though, yeah. And there's on the FPMT website, there's very interesting boxes available for these kind of projects with mantras on it. So you actually bless the creatures as well. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So they get benefits. Yeah. When we did with the cockroaches, what we had this kind of special boxes with the mantras. So we got all the cockroaches and then we went around the holy object for a few times. And then we release them in the nature, so at least they get some imprints, So if you do that, then you have a scorpion or whatsoever in a container closed, right? And then you have a table, you put some books of the Dharma or the Lamrim or something like that, or image of the Buddha. You go around 3 times and then you release them somewhere. Then there's for them more benefit. Yeah.
Okay.
And
yeah, I don't kill them when I catch them.
Yeah.
I catch them if they come in.
Yeah.
But like how people have allergic to bee stings.
I know,
I've got that kind of reaction. So I go to the hospital if I get stung. That's a problem. So
yeah.
I was hoping that if you just put the barrier around the house, I'm not actually killing them, but if they walk across it, they might get poisoned,
There's also other possibilities with chalk powder or, things that don't like to cross, but it's not poisonous, right? There's various methods you can use. When we were doing retreat and the ants, they came into the offerings, for example, what we did is, the tables we put in chalk, just chalk powder, yeah, and then they cannot cross, so that you can look into as well. There's also non-poisonous barriers you can put, right? Yeah, because you have to contemplate, right? Every creature, even a scorpion, has feeling, right? So that also, that doesn't like to be killed. Yeah. So that's another aspect to think about, that they also have feeling, they're all sentient, so yeah, then if you can prevent harming them, then it's much nicer, isn't it? And then, of course. Yeah, and then on top of them, if you put some imprints in their mind that they go around a holy object or something like that, then it's very, very fortunate for them as well, and for you even more. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Geshe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for the teaching.
Thank you.
Regarding Dharma texts, what do you do? Does that mean you can't highlight books or corners, or how do you work with that?
I mean, if you do it respectfully, that's fine. Even great masters in the tradition, they do it. But in the early days of Tibet, then there were no really highlighters, so they used all kind of dirty stuff coming from parts of the body. And that's not very, that's not very good, right? But these days we have very clear, but yeah, make sure it's like when you make a highlight or you underline with a color or something, also think you actually offer. Like we do that traditionally with saffron water, over mantra sheets, we fill those statues, so then we do that kind of put saffron water over the paper of the mantras and then roll them, right? So that's kind of an offering. Yeah. So when you make a highlight, also think you actually offer clarity and then offer clarity to all sentient beings, something like that, right? Yeah. Yeah. As long as you don't write through the letters. Yeah. If you want to make notes, write on the side or underneath. Yeah. So try always respect the letters, so to say, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for your teachings. Well, go straight to the point. I've taken refuge by myself, but I'd like to make official. So by you, can you make a date, or when can be done?
Let's look at my calendar.
Tomorrow? I'm joking. Well,
we do for those who we have dates somewhere. Yeah, so there will be an opportunity somewhere in You want to know?
When? When?
When? You want to know today, is it? So we do every year. We always have a particular date or event. I don't know. I put down. I think it's somewhere in July or something. Is it? Yeah. Allez, yeah. 23rd of July. 3rd. Yeah. It's on a Sunday.
I'll put it in an email as well.
Yeah, we can let you know later on. Yeah. Yeah. So every year we do for those, yeah, who are interested. But make sure you check. And before that, we will send an email and then we give you some information to read and then think about it and, you know, yeah. Oh, very auspicious. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. It's a very, yeah, I check mostly also an auspicious date with elements and everything. Yeah. Okay.
Liz, you've raised your hand.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Geshe. Thank you so much for your teachings. I'm just, can you hear me?
Yeah,
I'm
very well. Yeah.
technical issues tonight. I'm on my phone at the moment. Yeah, do you think, I know that you do lots of different courses in Yam Yam. You indeed teach on millions of them by the sound of it. Would it help if you wanted to be really, you know, serious about taking refuge, like some of us are thinking about? Would it help, and does it help if you do something like basic program?
Oh, very good.
Yeah, I just wondered if you had time. I know it's a bit late now, but or if you could talk about it another time, perhaps.
Yeah, there will be more of those programs because there's like a long-term program, right? I mean, to be honest, discovering Buddhism is a very good basis. You know, it gives you a very good understanding of the basis principles of the Lam Rim, because wherever you study later on is always falling back to the Lam Rim, right? So that's kind of a very good basic. Discovering Buddhism is in that regard very, very good basis, you know. And then to enhance your understanding of the individual topics of the Lam Rim, then we have this other kind of programs like Exploring Buddhism, goes into a little bit more detail of certain topics, and basic program goes even more in detail. Yeah. Yeah. But then it's 5 years instead of 2.
But you don't have to do, I mean, you can do that if you really want to, but that's not a sort of necessary to take refuge.
No, we don't pin you down for 5 years. Don't worry. No, that's up to the individual, right? Refuge is up to an individual. Lay vow is up to an individual. If you want to do a program, or you do not want to do programs, or you want to do a long program or short one, it's up to you. Up to you, right? Yeah. It's just what kind of time and effort you want to put into the spiritual part, you know? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. You had a question? Yeah. Which people? Fate. Yeah. Some people. Yeah. 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 I mean, some people have blind faith, some people have no faith, and some people have faith based on reasoning, right? There's various people, you know. So, and we cannot change people's mind, you know. If somebody doesn't have faith or doesn't respect any other form of religion, that's up to, we cannot really, if you can do something about it, then you can do it. But sometimes people, the minds are a bit difficult to talk to, you know. So, and yeah, some people have kind of a blind faith, but then in their form of religion, there's some benefit for them, and that's perfectly fine. You know, doesn't have to. No, even because Buddhism we don't really consider as a religion. No, yeah, but you know, even blind faith can be for certain people to a certain extent be positive, right? If you're in Tibetan Buddhism, we see that this old lady is going around a mani wheel, and you know, they don't really think about reasoning, but they only think about reciting mani mantra and try to be a good human being, right? So that's perfectly fine, you know. Or people in Christianity, if you go to Lourdes, it's called Lourdes, right? So people there go and they have a lot of faith in Lady Mary, right? And then they get cured of sicknesses or something like that. And that's perfectly fine, right? So that means that we should respect the various forms of faith and religion because it brings benefit. to a certain amount of people, right? Yeah. So that way we should be quite open, and then those who go against these kind of things or you know, don't act properly or something, and then sometimes, yeah, we cannot do much about it, right? So then that's a part of life, you know. Really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but in Buddhism, it's more based on reasoning, you know. Yeah. 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 Exactly. And analyzing and, you know, really checking it out. Yeah. Checking. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So then we dedicate our checking of what is it? 3 evenings. Yeah. So the next week there's a review question discussion session, right? So then you have that for the English speakers together, and I will hang out with my Spanish friends because they didn't have the opportunity to ask questions in the last 3 evenings. So I have some time with my Spanish colleagues or friends, how you call it. Yeah. Okay. So it's next week. Yeah. So let's dedicate this aspect of discovering what refuge actually means. So there's very virtuous to think about changing your mind all the way up to liberation, right? It's quite amazing. You know, it's not many people who are capable of doing that. So try to dedicate it also that in our future lifetimes, you might follow a similar direction to develop all the way up to enlightenment. Yeah. So in this way, we dedicate the praise, and also we now inserted the swift return prayer. I don't know if the Spanish people have that already.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Very quick. Yeah. It's been a few hours. Yeah. Okay. Dagi jine sabe gewa di tendan do gyundan kampe geba jetsen lozan draba yi tembe ningbo rindu selje sho. May the glorious Guru's life be long and stable, and may beings equal in space and happiness, and may I and others without exception accumulate merit and purify negativities, and may be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Tu zhen jian dan jiang yun ge ten zhou ga be la ga zhi ra zhi ba sun da nyu mi zi be zhi gi jie da den den ba be de nu de zhou jiang zhu san zhou rin bo chi ma ye pa na ge gu chi Geba nyamba meba yang gone gonde belwa sho toni tawa rimboje maye pana gegu chi geba nyamba meba yang gone gonde belwa sho. Okay. I was almost plain saying Dutch. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. See you next time. Yeah. You.
Thank you.